Major funding for Streamlined Dreams was made possible by a grant from the Dayton-Hudson Foundation. In the early days of moviegoing, theaters were more than just houses for dreams. They were very much a part of those dreams. The lights, the smell, the personality of the theater, each played a part in a total moviegoing fantasy.
In the 20s, it was a classical fantasy. Theaters were lavish picture palaces characterized by gilded columns, chandeliers, and grand staircases.
Well, they were glamorous theaters. We jokingly remember the days when no one could come in a theater unless they were properly attired. That's right. And if they didn't have a jacket or a tie on, they were asked to leave. We wouldn't dare do that today, Harry, would we?
Well, I can recall going down the aisle and you see somebody sitting there with his hat on. We had to ask him to remove his hat.
But these were beautiful, glamorous theaters, and the little old ladies had to stand at the aisle door and wait for an usher to open the door. The service was really great in those days.
With its classical designs, the movie industry was trying to gain respectability for a new medium of entertainment. But late in the 20s, it was technology that drew audiences and architects to the theater. With new technology came new problems for theater owners and architects. Sounds bounced off hard plaster walls, and those walls had to be treated. This theater, the Granada, was acoustically treated by Minnesota architect Jack Liebenberg in 1928. It made his reputation, and he headed into the 30s as a leading theater designer.
We used a ground-up sandstone mixed with wood fiber and mixed that with a plaster, which had a porous effect. And also it had a rough texture, so it eliminated any smooth reverberation or bouncing of the sound. And it still has good acoustics to this day. All they do is wash it down and it's there.
Today, the Granada Theater is the suburban world and retains much of its original design, a design based on the style of the grand picture palaces. Liebenberg was using the architectural vocabulary of the times, but in the 30s, times changed drastically, and so did that vocabulary. What happens in the 30s is that the new style, the Art Deco, the modern style, is used to present a fantasy of the future.
The guards! Tell Zarkov! Let's get there! Stop! Stop! The atom furnace has been destroyed. The beams which support the city are dying out. But I have discovered a new ray which will save the city. Use it at once. I will, on one condition, that you give my friends their liberty. Your friends shall be freed. Swear it. I do by the great god Teo. Come to the laboratory.
To achieve this futuristic fantasy, Flash Gordon's set designers used the new 30s style, Art Deco.
First introduced in Paris in 1925, where it received its name, Art Deco was taken to heart immediately by the most daring designers. It was a style based on geometric shapes, intersecting surfaces, and sunburst effects. Early designs were jazzy, ornate, and very chic. The films had their own connotations of Art Deco. Well into the 30s, every kept woman of the silver screen was accommodated with a deco interior. The equation was simple. Art Deco equals sex. Yards of white satin, a bed without posts, a chair without feet, a mirror without a frame, for a woman without morals. Aside from its moral connotation, Art Deco's use of light and patterns suggested endless fantasies. Berkeley's By a Waterfall illustrates the ornate, embellished style of early Art Deco. His Shadow Waltz illustrates the beginning of a new phase, a streamlining of design. As the 30s progressed, Art Deco went from chic to popular. Everything from vacuum cleaners and pencil sharpeners to trains and boats were designed and redesigned in Deco style. The designs themselves projected strong connotations of speed and technology. America was fighting its way out of the Depression, not through nostalgia, but through optimism about the future, progress symbolized by machines.
All of us are conditioned by our times. The clothes that we wear are available in the store, but how we put them together is our own taste. Okay, so Liebenberg was working in the current vocabulary, which was Art Deco, which was available to him. I think he used it in creative, imaginative ways. Liebenberg's theaters brought elegance and fantasy to ordinary neighborhoods. Most of the 200 projects he handled in the 30s were remodelings of crudely designed silent theaters. Sometimes the buildings hadn't been theaters at all.
There was an old dairy called the Brown Dairy, and the cow barn had a loft for hay and other feed for the animals, and we tore off the front of the old dairy store and continued that barn up to the street. and then finally built a foyer. And well, today, of course, it's a twin theater. And the Edina Theater was developed before there was any commercial area there whatsoever. People didn't want motion pictures for fear that it would have a moral issue involved. They're seeing things that are going on that are not good for their development, the children and so on. If you'll notice on the top of the building, there's sort of a tower that was started. And we left with a small finial on top, which was to be the only recognition of a theater there. But finally, after stores moved in, drugstores developed, and other commercial, the city did not object to a marquee.
Marquees are a familiar sight today, but it was in the 30s they achieved this classic form. In fact, much of what looks familiar today was developed then. The facade is a bright, three-dimensional piece of streamlined sculpture. The sleek surfaces, bright colors, and sophisticated lighting of auditoriums and lobbies. Interior designs that focus attention on the screen rather than themselves, and other things.
Popcorn, anybody mention putting a popcorn machine in the theater, and they used to say, and stink up our theaters? My first recollection of vending anything in the theater is when Al Anson, my district manager, came in. He says, go down to Julie store and see if you can get one of those small cases that they display fountain pens in. And I said, so? And he says, we'll put candy bars in there, and we put it on the box where the ticket taker was. People come in to buy a candy bar. Well, that was the very first step towards vending.
You'd sell your green leaves, you'd get 5 for a penny, you'd get sixers, you'd get jawberry acres were 2 for a penny. You bought a red one and a black one. The red one was real hot. The more you sucked it and it got down, boy, it got so hot in your mouth you couldn't stand it.
Then it was a question of keeping the theater clean. And that changed the seating arrangement in the theater. Instead of having them 32 inches back to back, which is considered standard, we moved them to 34 and 36 inches.
Not only were patrons allowed knee room, but hard wooden seats also became comfortable. And hot, stuffy theaters received cooler air.
We were the very first business to air condition, and for many years we advertised that we were the coolest spot in town.
That's right. And they came in and put those old-fashioned washed air systems. You remember them?
I do, very well. But I remember out in South Dakota many years ago, Harry, we used to haul in a whole truckload of ice. Mm-hmm. And this ice was stored in a large room, and the fans blew over the ice to cool the air. Many people who were ill, many people who suffered from hay fever ailments, found the theater a great haven.
It was the height of the Depression, and people needed a haven. Liebenberg's theaters provided that, but much more. The people who owned and operated his theaters responded to the needs of the community.
We used to have what we call potato man. They brought 3 potatoes, and they'd get admission, and we gathered bushels and bushels of the nicest potatoes because the mother would never give her child the runt of the potato crop. They'd give them the best. And we, in turn, used to give those potatoes to the Salvation Army for distribution to the needy. But, you know, we were told that the theater was a prominent part of the community, and we should adjust our sites to try to serve the community beyond just providing entertainment. I recall the morning of this, gosh, it was just breaking daylight. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. My phone rang, and a voice says, Harry, the Catholic Church is burning down. And in my semi-wakefulness, I said, well, so what? You know, he says, stop and think. He says, where is Father going to hold his Mass Sunday? Then it occurred to me. I got dressed quickly and ran out there, and there was the priest, and I can't think of his name, was all begrimed with charcoal and soot, and he was trying to salvage the sacraments out of the church. And I stopped him and I said, told him how sorry I was losing his church, and I says, you can have our theater free of charge for all your masses for as long as you need. And I said, we'll take all the advertising material out of everything so that it won't have any relevance to being a theater. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and put his hand on my shoulder, and the tears came to his eyes.
It took us into a different atmosphere.
It was a great era of glamour. Greta Garbo, Joan Crawford.
You have the Roy Rogers and the Lash LaRues and the Whip Wilson.
It was a family affair. This is the important thing.
You see 1 or 2 movies for a quarter.
During the Depression years, we had very little physical comforts as such, and money.
We gave the money away. People needed that money at that time. That was the height of the Depression.
Excitement, the serials, the comedy, the news, and the feature. It was an experience, a total movie-going experience.
The fantasy of the future. It's a futuristic fantasy escape from reality.
This futuristic environment was created by Jack Liebenberg in 1938. It's the Varsity Theater near the University of Minnesota. In it, he maximized Art Deco's most important design element.
I think the outstanding characteristic, one would have to say, is the use of light, the way light was actually part of the architecture.
Here, the light works with the smooth, sleek surfaces and bright colors of the foyer to create a cool fantasy environment. If it looks futuristic today, imagine its attraction in 1938. The auditorium, too, must have been impressive with its horizontal and vertical bands of light guiding eyes to the screen. But it's really the outside of the Varsity that Art Deco is all about. Here, the vertical sign and marquee unite to create a piece of three-dimensional sculpture. Liebenberg used stone, glass block, steel, and neon to create a blazing beacon of light to attract patrons. Liebenberg's theaters were based on fantasy. But no more so than the films inside.
And every week you'd watch 15 to 18 minutes of a serial, and boy, when you're getting all primed to it.
We are doomed, Professor Gordon. The planet is rushing madly toward the Earth, and no human power can stop it.
It blows up in midair, and boy, you couldn't wait to come back in a week and see what happened.
Any news?
Yes, the whole world is in a state of frenzy. Read these.
The motif of motion pictures in those days was to make the hero someone that the kids wanted to emulate.
Scared, huh?
We went to movies for entertainment, but we also had a hero in that particular star, and they had to do better each time.
Captain, do not let them escape!
The excitement, glamour, and fantasy of the movies certainly drew people to the theater. But theater owners as businessmen in the heart of the Depression couldn't rely solely on films to draw audiences.
The big savior during the Depression for the theaters of America was, of course, bank night. The first thing to do was to get registration in your books, and you put the books around everywhere, inviting people to register. And then on a given night, usually it was Wednesday or Thursday, we would get on the stage and someone would pick a number out of the barrel. We'd have somebody from the audience volunteer to come up. And if they were president of the theater, they won the jackpot. If they didn't, another amount was added to it, sometimes $50, $100, and the bank night jackpot would continue to grow.
We had to rope off a whole city block because the people, they had 3 minutes in which time to claim the money. Once their name was called from the stage, if you recall,
exactly,
They had exactly 3 minutes, and we had judges to clock the time. Well, the thing was so popular that all of the people that wanted to participate couldn't get in the theater. And many people had attended during the day and had signed up for that particular night. And so the theater couldn't accommodate all of these people, and so the result was that they all congregated out in front.
Out in the street. Mm.
And if so-and-so's name was called, they would make an aisle and make room for this person in order to get him or her up to the theater stage within the 3-minute time. And people had a lot of confidence in it. And people needed that money at that time.
Bank nights were simply good business. They drew people to the theater on off nights. Architects, too, were good business. They designed elegant facades and interiors to draw people to one theater and not another. Liebenberg's designs were among the most imaginative. In fact, many of them could be framed as works of art. But they were practical, too. Interior designs maximized space while providing smooth traffic flow and comfortable seating. Lobbies were designed for patrons to wait inside the theater for films to begin, and not in lines around the block. And facades were designed simply and economically to attract patrons. The synthesis of Liebenberg's theater design is found in the Uptown Theater.
The opportunities that we had and the freedom of going ahead allowed us to expand way beyond the normal ken in theater design. With so many stores and other commercial establishments in the neighborhood, we were struggling with how to identify this particular theater, and identity was the thing that they wanted. We came up with the idea of a triangular tower. And Uptown was the first one in this country that utilized a tower identification. We had to get permission from the city of Minneapolis to develop an ordinance that would permit us to build a vertical tower sign, because there were many arguments as to toppling the sign over in a storm and lightning attraction. We had to build anti-lightning devices in there. So we took the 3 sides and opened them up so that there were slots on all sides, and the wind could blow through it and not against it. And we finally got an okay from the city to go ahead and build that sign. But we had to build a model and show them, the city engineers, that we had the foundation strong enough to carry that particular sign.
The tower dominated the area and still does today, but it was only part of Liebenberg's plan for the Uptown's special identity. Inside, he experimented with several ideas. In an effort to tie the theater to the city of Minneapolis, Liebenberg's plan included 2 sketches by Austrian architect Gustav Krollmann.
And he had a very ingenious idea of taking 12-inch blocks and carving them out so as to get a silhouette effect on the wall. And we started to use black light on the sculpture.
These murals dominate the auditorium. One side shows early explorers looking to the future of Minneapolis. The other, the father of waters and his daughters, the 5 Great Lakes. The murals have since been covered or torn down. In fact, much of Liebenberg's original designs are gone, as is the case with many Deco theaters that have been remodeled or modernized. The Uptown's illustrious facade, however, remains as a most compelling piece of sculpture for the most creative of Liebenberg's streamlined dreams.